Good day, everyone. Richard Cowperthwait for Northwest Access TV. Thanks for joining us for another one of our pre-November 8th election shows, trying to interview all or at least most local candidates in contested races. And happy to have on hand today for an hour the four candidates running in the Franklin Senate District, as in the two-member Franklin Senate District. I'll start down to my right. Nakuma Palczewski, have I got that right, Nakuma? I hope I didn't butcher that too much. Democratic candidate from St. Albans Town. Pam McCarthy, another Democratic candidate from St. Albans Town. Senator Randy Brock, Swanton Republican. And Bob Norris, a Sheldon Republican. Thanks for joining us, folks. Nakuma, let's start with you. How about some background and tell us how you happen to jump into this race?
I'm originally from Texas. I married my husband, who's law enforcement and military, so we've traveled a little bit. We moved here in 2020, and this was actually the first place we actually wanted to build roots. We love Vermont. We're first-time homeowners here in Vermont. I run a small business out of my house around the schedule of my kids. I have a 6-year-old, he just turned 6, and an almost 2-year-old. I have worked as a firefighter and EMT for 5 years in our last town, which is a rural town in Maine. I'm currently the vice chair of the police advisory committee for the town, and I'm also part of the Maple Run subgroup goals committee. I've worked in pharmacies, and I have a master's in accounting, so my small business is actually a bookkeeping business that I work with currently with local nonprofits.
That's right. The first time you've run for...
The first time I run for a
public
campaign.
office?
Yeah, I saw that my generation is being affected by a lot of the issues that are happening. I have young children and aging parents, and so a lot of the issues are affecting us. Affordability, though I have a small business, we're currently on my husband's income because first year I'm trying to make a profit. I have 2 young kids. My youngest is, we could not find an affordable childcare for him, so I'm currently home with him. That's what made me start the business. If we were to move to Vermont currently right now, even though my husband makes a significant amount, we would not be able to afford a house. And so we're very fortunate we moved before the prices went up, because currently my brother-in-law had an opportunity to transfer out here for his work. He's federal law enforcement, and chose not to because he couldn't afford a house out here. And so we're losing a lot of young professionals. And the affordability aspect is no longer just, when people think affordability, they see low income, but it's now more of a middle class issue. Low income is affected, but so are middle class. And I think we're losing a lot of potential. I was fortunate enough to go to a high school that involved tech training. I actually walked out of my high school with a pharmacy technician certification. And it took me and my friends a step forward in job force. I think it's so important, especially in the 21st century, to make sure our kids have the skills to be able to thrive and survive in a new economy.
Pam, no stranger to politics. You've taken a shot at this seat before, as I recall.
Yes, I did. I ran in 2018, and I came to this pretty much as somebody who moved here because I really wanted to live here in Vermont. My husband took a job at Missisquoi Valley Union in 1995. We've raised 4 kids here and now have 5 grandkids. I've been a small business owner here in St. Albans with my sons Mike and Brian, and we did that for a while, and then we were all working full-time other jobs in addition to our small business, so we stopped doing that about 8 years ago. But in that time and before that, I have been somebody who's been very engaged in working with families in particular, pretty much from prenatal all the way up through elders. And those jobs have been leadership at the Parent Child Center here in Franklin and Grand Isle. I was the Franklin Grand Isle field director for the Agency of Human Services for a while, and most recently have been the head of Vermont Family Network, which is a statewide family organization that supports families of kids with disabilities and special health needs. Retired from that in February, and really took some time to think a little bit about what I wanted to do next, and really decided that it would be a good time to lend my skills as somebody who is experienced in a lot of ways in life and professionally to step up again and run, especially in the Senator Parent had stepped down this time, and it looked like a good time for a Democratic woman to give it a shot one more time. It's been over a decade since we had a Democratic woman in this role when Sarah Cattell was in it, and I really feel like I have a lot to offer. Like Nakuma, I come from a military military family. My dad was in the Air Force and traveled all over the world. But when Jack and I came to Vermont and settled in Franklin County, we put down very strong roots, and I'm very, very privileged to live here. So I want to make sure that I'm representing family voices, that we're looking out for taking care of our waterways and our working farmlands. And last but certainly not least is that we have an economy that works for everybody here in Franklin County. We kind of set the tone for the rest of the state.
Of course, your son, Mike McCarthy, state rep, that's actually my house district in St. Albans City. Out of curiosity, if Mike's reelected and if you're elected, would you be the first mother-son combo in the legislature, or have there been some of the,
As far as we could tell, we could be the first
Really?
mother-son, and we certainly are the first one where the son preceded the mother. I have to say Mike's work in the legislature has been very inspiring to me as an individual and a family member. I think I would have been really floored by a lot of the things he's been able to accomplish as a young person here in our state, even if I weren't his parent. So, yeah.
And Pam makes a good point. Again, we do have an open seat this time around with Senator Corey Parent, a Republican from St. Albans Town, not running for re-election. Senator Brock, you still haven't had enough of Montpelier. You'd like to head back there. Tell us about yourself, Randy.
Well, some would say it's a bad habit, but I don't think that's the case. I've been very fortunate and honored to have served as a senator from Franklin County for 5 terms, and I'm running now for my 6th term in the Senate. In the Senate, I also serve as the Senate Minority Leader. I've had, let's say, an interesting career. I've done a lot of things. I started my career after graduating from college, and I graduated from Middlebury. I went on to get a master's degree at Yale. But from Middlebury, I served in the Army. I was a military police officer. I served in Vietnam, among a number of other places. And I learned a trade. And after the Army, I was a police operations officer and a criminal investigations officer, among other things. After the Army, I came back to Vermont, and I've lived in Vermont at this point most of my adult life. I've lived here in Franklin County in the same house for the past 36 years. And before that, I lived in Addison County for, 7, 8 years, something like that. And I was a deputy sheriff in Addison County, and I also started a business there. And that business was a private security firm that was national in scope, and it principally dealt with protecting critical properties, principally government properties that were either secret, top secret, or Q clearance facilities. I sold that company quite a number of years ago at this point, and then I continued my consulting practice. My consulting practice is in risk oversight and risk management, as well as security and fraud. And I wound up working for a company called Fidelity Investments, and I started as its chief security officer. And Fidelity is the largest private financial services company in America, largest private mutual fund company, 2nd largest discount brokerage company. And at the time that I was there, it protected well over $1 trillion of other people's money, both for individuals, thousands of individuals across the country, and the world for that matter. And at Fidelity, I had a number of jobs. I headed the security group. I headed the internal audit group, and my experience in auditing was useful there. And I ultimately was the chief oversight officer, chief risk officer. When I left Fidelity, it was sort of as a, quote, early retirement. I lasted about 6 months, and my wife said, you really ought to go find something to do. And that's what interested me in politics. I'd always been active behind the scenes in Vermont politics since I was here. And even though I worked at Fidelity, both here and, in fact, overseas for a couple of years, my residence was here. And indeed, when I worked in Boston, I would commute every day. I would go down in the morning by flight and come back at night. And I did that for, 15 years.
Really?
And that's what you do when you want to live in Vermont. The work that I did as chief risk officer was to oversee things that could go wrong. And someone spoke to me about what was happening in the auditor's office. And the fact that we were getting our audits done a year and a half after the end of the fiscal year. And for a job like that, that's sort of being the state archaeologist, not the state auditor. there's no excuse. You wouldn't balance your checkbook a year late. And that's what we were doing. And we got that fixed. We got that fixed in my first year in office, and we were the most improved state auditor's office in the United States in terms of the timeliness of reporting. And we did so without a single state employee grievance. For the first time in years, there were no grievances in that office by our state employees.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you had appeared to win re-election on election night. And I think, was it Tom Salmon Jr.?
Correct. It was 134 votes
and didn't he,
to begin with.
And then we had didn't he concede at some point?
Yes, he did.
Only to reconsider that and the recount turned that around.
The recount was 102 votes in the other direction. It was the closest election in Vermont history.
Really? Wow.
And I could have said that the election was stolen, but I didn't.
Interesting. Of course, later made
because it wasn't.
Later made a bid for governor.
Yep.
And of course, I think I mentioned this to you before. Nothing you have to hear from me, but had you maybe run against Peter Shumlin 2 years later, we might not be talking to a state senator here.
Things may have been different, but
anyway. But you eventually landed in the state senate.
And I've enjoyed just about every minute of it. There may be a couple of things I didn't, but most of the time I've enjoyed it. And I think we've made progress in the Senate. I mentioned I'm the minority leader. I serve on the Finance Committee, also on the Economic Development Committee, which are key committees for what Vermont's problems are right now. And I also chair the Joint Internet Technology or Information Technology Oversight Committee, which is absolutely a critical committee as far as our push for statewide broadband.
Very good. Bob Norris, no stranger to Franklin County politics, former longtime sheriff and still state rep from the Sheldon-Swanton district. So for the few folks who don't know Mr. Norris, tell us about yourself, Bob, and how'd you up and try to go from the House to the Senate?
Well, it's a short story, actually, Richard, but good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Bob Norris.
I should just quickly note, sorry, we're taping this show on Monday, October 10th, in case any huge issues come up after our taping and people are wondering why we're not talking about it. Sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Not a problem. I've been involved in elections in Franklin County for a number of years, as you well know. I've lived in Franklin County all my life. I married my high school sweetheart of 45 plus years now. We've raised 4 children here in Franklin County. We're now blessed with 10 grandchildren. We're very fortunate in that respect. I presently serve Franklin 4, which is the Sheldon-Swanton district. I was fortunate enough to be approached to run as a candidate. And after discussing this with the family, we decided we would throw our hat into the ring. And thus, we're very fortunate, as we have been, prior to, and I serve on House Judiciary, which is a very intricate committee. We've discussed a lot of issues, a lot of heartfelt issues, I might add, throughout the state. But prior to that, as you well know, I was elected in 1998, started office in February of 99, excuse me, as Franklin County Sheriff. And basically, I set my own term limits there. I said 20 years is enough. I need to step away. It's time for change. But I'd like to think that while I was there, the administrative staff and the folks that we surrounded ourselves with brought the sheriff's office into the 21st century. There was a lot of positive change that took place, and we served all of Franklin County. And it was a very illustrious experience, I might add. We dealt with many convoluted issues in and throughout the county, and I've sat on numerous boards, both at a national and state and local level. Presently, I still serve as town moderator. We haven't been too busy in our town meeting days as of late, where we're looking to get back to the town meeting this year. I serve on the BCA Justice of the Peace. I'm a member of the director of the Sheldon Historical Society presently. I've been involved in public service for the better part of 30 some odd years now. As far as jumping into this race here, I guess it's just something that I grew up with. I enjoy public service. I wasn't sure about the House, especially after the first year, where we did most of our work, or all of our work, via Zoom computer. And after the speaker gavelled out that first session, I kind of wondered if this is something I wanted to continue, but I had the opportunity to go down the second year and meet with some folks down there. There's a lot of good people down there. I might add, at any given point in time, we may be on different ends of the spectrum as to how we think and how we vote. but I respect their opinions, and I'm sure they respect mine also. So when the opportunity presented itself for the Senate seat, being engaged in public service, once again, I went back, talked to my wife about it and the family, and we decided that I still had something to offer to the constituents throughout Franklin County who have been very good to me and my family. So we decided to throw our hat into the ring and hope for the best. And there's 4 good candidates, I might add, for the position. Only 2 seats, unfortunately. So some of us are going to pick up our bat and ball and go home afterwards. But until then, it's been a long campaign season. I'm sure that everyone sitting here will agree with that. But we look forward to November 8th and hope for the best.
Very good. I should be remiss if I didn't mention redistricting. The Franklin Senate District, a bit of a change here. Richford back in. Montgomery's still out. Fairfax kicked into the Chittenden North District, the single member, one of the new Chittenden County districts. Fletcher, I guess, with the Lamoille, mostly Lamoille County,
yes.
Senator Westman's district. And question, I guess, for Randy Alberg, talking to another legislator around here who certainly seemed to know what he was talking about. He said, Richard, at Alberg, they should have put Alberg into the Grand Isle County Colchester district, Senator Mazza's district, and said person told me that those numbers, had they done that, would have worked out better for Grand Isle Colchester Senate district than the Franklin Senate district. Is that not the case?
No, that's not correct.
He seemed totally sure of himself about that. No,
that's not correct. And I served
Alberg is still in.
I served on the apportionment committee,
Okay,
which consisted of an equal distribution of people from all political parties. And we agonized, and believe me, it is a tremendous puzzle. But the reason that Alberg stayed in the district is both the historical fact that it's been in the district for the past 20 years at this point,
20.
one, and 2, that by putting it in the Grand Isle district, the Grand Isle Colchester district would have numerically been farther off, considerably farther off than it was, and then we would have to do something to build up the numbers in the Franklin Senate district by moving one of those back. That would have had a roll-on effect of other districts such as Lamoille and Chittenden North. It's a very intricate process, but our goal of the process is to have districts that are contiguous, that have reasonable geographical connections with each other, but that also have a deviation. In other words, they're equal in numbers, as the Supreme Court requires, as close as possible and with a minimum deviation. And that's why Alberg is in the Franklin district. So
relatively comfortable with what happened, the changes in the Franklin Senate district? I guess there had to be changes.
There had to be changes. Frankly, I know I'm sorry to lose Fletcher and Fairfax, which are integral parts of Franklin County. Richford is also an integral part of Franklin County, but unfortunately it, for the past 20 years, has been in the Essex-Orleans district, where a mountain has existed between that town and the rest of its district. So I think that's an improvement, but we are sorry to lose those towns that are no longer with us.
Right. Let's get into some of the issues. Certainly the big issue probably getting the most attention, or some of the most attention, Article 22, Prop 5, the Reproductive Liberty Amendment, one of 2 proposed constitutional amendments on the ballot. Nakuma, take a stab at that. Is that something you're supporting?
Yes, I believe people should have the right to choose their health care in general, and reproductive right is very important as a woman. There are so much complications within birth, and that's why childbearing women had a high mortality rate in the turn of the century. Now we are able to have 21st century medicine that can alleviate a lot of the stresses of childbearing. And I believe that decision should only be made between the patient and the doctor, who are knowledgeable and understands what's happening. As a first responder, we were called to sometimes issues with birth that people didn't really know about, and we were very fortunate at that time that the way to help a woman was available and easygoing. There are a lot of cases throughout the nation where we have to wait till certain criteria is met and the mother is suffering. So I truly do believe that Prop 5, Amendment 22, or Amendment 22 is very important for us to do. Vermont also has always been I'm from Texas originally, and Vermont has always been a leader in politics. Growing up, I always thought it was interesting. They were like, who's Vermont voting for the presidential elections? It's a small state in the middle of nowhere. Like, no one knows the population is so small compared to Texas, where I'm from, but we've always been steadfast in our politics and been a leader in the nation. Everybody's turned to us. So I think Prop 5, Amendment 22, if we codify it, it will actually bring a precedence to the rest of the nation to realize that it's able to be done.
Many people ask, is that an issue on the minds of
I think
your would-be constituents?
Yes. I actually spoke to a woman who ended up having complications with her first child's birth and had her uterus taken out to save her life. She ended up having pain, called the ER in the middle of the night. They said, come in. She's like, let me wait till my husband comes home because I have 2 young kids sleeping. Wakes up, makes breakfast, goes to the ER, ends up having an ectopic pregnancy. It's a 1% chance for her to have an ectopic pregnancy. She was able to get it out, was home by dinner. That's not happening throughout the country. And this could have been a very different scenario for her family if we did not have the rights we do.
Certainly strong feelings about that proposed constitutional amendment. Article 1, Prop 2, if there's controversy about this one, I guess I've missed it, is of course prohibiting slavery and indentured servitude. Has that come up with you support that?
I've never heard anybody say anything against it. I believe it's right now is just changing language to hit the 21st century. Yeah. And I think a lot of the Constitution, it was based in the time it was written, and it's just updating the law.
Yeah. Pam, Article 22, Prop 5.
So I would echo what my counterpart Nakuma has said. I definitely support Article 22, Part 5. I believe that people should have the choice about when and how they have children. I believe that people should be able to choose when and how they have contraception. And I think on this Indigenous Peoples Day, it's important to note that oftentimes there have been situations where people have been not allowed to have children. There was forced sterilization during the eugenics movement that impacted that population, and also people of color and people with disabilities. And so as somebody who comes most recently from the disability community, Article 22 would also ensure that those folks had a choice about whether and how they would have children. So I think it's really important, and I will say it's coming up at the doors quite a lot. I do think it's something that most of the people I've spoken with support. There has been some real strong pushback and a lot of misinformation about what this will mean. The whole piece around late-term abortion is a red herring. I mean, obviously, this is meant to be a choice between the person bearing a child or potentially bearing a child and their doctor, and keeping politics out of it. And I think it's really important that we go back to a time where those are the ways those decisions are made. It's really critically important that families are the ones who are making those choices for themselves with medical support. So, yeah, I'm in support of that. And as far as Proposition 2,
has anybody even asked you about that?
No, not at all. And
nobody?
No, not at all. And I think there has certainly not been as much publicity or education around that particular proposition. I do think it's important that we put this in language so that there is no doubt that we do not support any kind of slavery or indentured servitude for anyone, especially not as punishment for a crime, which was why that exception was made in the law before.
Randy, is that Article 1, Prop 2? Anybody asking about that? Has that come up with your campaigning at all?
It comes up, and it certainly has come up in the legislature, as this is an issue that is not new in the General Assembly. It's something that's, as a constitutional amendment, it had to be brought to the legislature on 2 occasions over 2 different biennium, and it was.
Lengthy process.
It is a very lengthy and a very careful process. Let me start by saying I support a woman's right to choose.
Yeah, back to Article 22, yeah.
Pure and simple. But at the same time, I look at the law that we have right now, which is in statute rather than a constitutional amendment. Mm-hmm. And it is very clear. It allows abortion at any time, indeed up to the moment of birth. I think many people have a nuanced view of abortion. That the difference comes where there is a fetus that is viable outside of the womb. And people are concerned about that. And that's probably what I hear about more than anything else. And as you look back at Roe versus Wade was elegant in the way it was constructed because it looked at the various stages in a pregnancy, and it looked at the late stage of pregnancy and the language that keeps being repeated. And it's language, by the way, that is in Article 22, and most people don't notice it. It says except where there's a compelling state interest applied in the least restrictive means. And that often simply has meant that abortion is not an appropriate solution where there's no issue with respect to the health of the mother and the child is viable outside of the womb. In other words, if you have a child that is in the third trimester that can live outside of the womb, abortion may not be entirely appropriate. But that is a judgment case. It is not a hard and fast rule. It is not a problem right now in Vermont because, at least as far as our medical providers are concerned, they don't do it.
Right.
But the concern, of course, is that going to be the case for the next doctor who comes in once this is passed? Might that doctor do something different? We certainly see the problems that exist elsewhere in the country, though, where there are prohibitions on abortion. And people, women who are facing life-threatening situations are being denied abortions. Women who are victims of rape or incest are being denied abortions. That is clearly not right, at least in my book, and that's why I support this amendment.
Bob, throw it to you. What about Article 22, Prop 5? I suspect that's come up a bit in your campaigning.
It has come up somewhat. Article 22, aka Prop 5, it's a very controversial, very emotional issue, which fortunately I'll probably never have to make that decision, and that's not being said lightly. What I can tell you about Article 22 is, of course, I serve Swanton and Sheldon. And while in the House, I received approximately 150 postcards from my constituents, of which one person said to support Article 22.
One person,
One
out of
person that
150.
support, and the other 149 approximately said to vote against it. So
With these separate people, it sounds like someone might have kind of orchestrated this, or not? With these seemingly separate, all different people, as opposed to one group sending you a bunch of postcards that they had their friends sign or something?
No, many of the names that appeared on this ballot, it wasn't an organized movement. It wasn't an organized movement. But the fact of the matter is that they signed their names to it and checked the box and sent it down to Montpelier to me. So while in the House, I voted against Prop 5 just due to the fact that the majority of the constituents that I serve currently seem to not be in favor of Prop 5.
Do you think that changes if you're elected Senate with most of Franklin County or all of the Senate district? Do you think that changes? Have you got a feel for how for Article 22 will fare just in the Franklin Senate district on November 8th?
Well, I've spoke to many people who are in favor of Article 22. If I had my crystal ball and I knew exactly how it was going to turn out, I'd be polishing up my name plaque. Just said Senator Bob Norris on it, okay, but I don't have that ability. So basically, it's a very controversial issue. At this point in time, it's a moot issue as far as our thoughts on it, just due to the fact that it's on the ballot. And the good folks of the state of Vermont are going to have their say on this. And my only concern with Article 22 is I don't think elected officials should be telling anybody what they should or should not be doing with their bodies. And we're talking about birth at this particular point in time, that's one thing. But my only concern with this is I just don't want the possibility, and it may be a small possibility, of abortion to be used as a contraceptive method. I realize there's certain caveats that, when it comes to the child's life, the woman's life, certain instances such as rape or whatever else, where those things have to be taken into consideration. But just, haphazardly saying, 16, 17 weeks in, well, I don't want this child, so I'm going to abort it. That's a bit of a concern to me. But I haven't voted yet, so.
Can you tell us, are you still pondering your vote on that?
I'm still pondering my vote on that. And even when I do vote, I probably won't tell you how I voted, because I believe that's why we have those little curtains around the ballot boxes, because that vote is mine, and it's mine to bear with me. So, but I haven't voted yet, and I haven't made my mind up on which way to go on this. And I am not flip-flopping on this whatsoever. I voted no against it in the House due to the fact that many of my constituents reached out and said, don't support Prop 5. And I'm down there to represent them, not Bob Norris. So thus, that takes care of that vote here.
Has Article 1, Prop 2, has that come up in your campaigning?
I don't think anybody knows about Article 1. At least the folks that I've been talking to know. And when it has come up, I've brought it up to certain individuals while we're speaking about, enshrining Article 22 into the Constitution, as far as if in fact this takes place, then we don't have to worry about it again. I said, well, my understanding is we're changing the Constitution when it comes to Prop 2, Article 1. So I'm not sure. I realize it takes 2 bienniums to make a change in the Constitution for or against whatever we're looking at here, but it's somewhat, condescending to say that once it's in the Constitution, it's there forever, because it appears things, may be changed. So
we'll start at this side of the table. It's kind of an in-house issue, but again, we certainly appreciate the folks here at Northwest Access TV with some good coverage around Franklin County. And again, it's not the best of times funding-wise for public access stations, funding-wise, in part because of a decrease in revenue shares because less people are subscribing to cable. So a question, do you support the idea of yearly funding requests or restructuring something like Vermont's telecommunications taxes to benefit public access stations statewide and keep their overall mission going for years to come? Bob, any thoughts on that?
Oh, right back to me again, aren't we?
Yeah, I'll start with you.
Okay. I don't have a problem with looking at the concept or the idea of funding, in this particular case, PBS or Northwest Cable Access. I'd have to know more about it as far as, what amounts of money we're looking at, what's the viewership throughout the county, who has access to this. When we start using taxpayers' monies for certain things, in this particular case, the PBS and the Northwest Access, we have to be accountable for it. So I'm not saying that I'm against it, but I just would need more information on it before I made a determination as to which way I would support it.
Senator, some thoughts on that?
Sure.
Again, we're one of, I guess,
I've certainly been
24.
approached on this issue on a number of occasions before. In general, I'm supportive of the public access aspect of public radio and public television. I do have concerns at times about the appearance, particularly in radio, of partisanship. And certainly government shouldn't be supporting partisan politics. I think Vermont Public tries its best not to avoid that, but I think many people believe that there is a lien associated with the way public radio in particular approaches its business. That is a concern. At the same time, this is a resource for the state. There's no other resource such as where we are here right now, in which the public has direct access to be able to get on television, to get a message out, whether that message is or is not partisan. Citizens have the ability to get on Vermont Public Television and get to the public.
And we're talking again about the public access stations as opposed to, I realize the connection kind of, but
Correct.
We're talking about the 24 public access
Correct.
stations.
And so
like us.
that piece I'm firmly supportive of and have been in the past. This is something the Economic Development Committee deals with. I'm on that committee and I'm supportive of it on that committee.
Pam, thoughts on that?
So I think it's really important to have this type of free speech medium, and I would want to know more detail about what it costs to do this, who is accessing it, what the programming looks like more specifically. I unfortunately don't receive this channel. However, I'm able to get pieces on YouTube from it when I want to find those, and I think it's really important. And recently I was reading some things about how public access had been particularly important during the time when people were isolated in the pandemic, so that they could get clear, consistent, current information about what they needed to be doing. So when you think about the power of this, and also the lessening of our local media, i.e. the newspapers, journalism, the Messenger's a shadow of its former self. I know we were discussing
Not
earlier.
to mention the free press.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The free press was where we started our conversation today. And just looking at the importance of local media and people understanding what's going on in their own communities, there's so much that happens on this level that people need to know about in their day-to-day lives, and also for decision makers to know so that they're better informed as they're making decisions about the people that they serve. So yes, I would certainly consider that. I think it's an important resource at a grassroots level, and it's been something that we've been able to participate in over the last few years, certainly in terms of being able to get information out. And thanks again for inviting us today.
Nice to have you folks here. Nakuma, thoughts on that issue?
I would echo with understanding the budget better, understanding where the revenue is going. I think as elected officials, it's our job to make sure we're steward of our people's money, especially in the current economic situation where people are paying higher taxes than average in the nation, and to make sure the money is being used correctly. So I would just want to go through that report. But as a child who grew up in a lower socioeconomic level, we watched PBS and all the time, and so it was something that gave us a culture. What's going on in the world, what's happening. And I really do appreciate what you have, because especially right currently with people still dealing with COVID and illnesses, people aren't making it to town hall meetings, aren't making it to school board meetings, and this way they're accessible and get to know the knowledge of what's happening. Yeah. It's also really nice for people who are more homebound to see their grandchild play basketball or soccer or football and not have to be out there. And so accessibility is so important, especially in the press, and for people to have knowledge and be able to vote and make decisions on their community as a whole. And so I think you guys are doing a great job putting the information out there. I know you guys are at all our town meetings and all our school board meetings, and I really appreciate the fact that nothing is behind the doors, and so everybody understands what decisions are being made and how it's affecting them and how they come to those decisions.
Thanks. Speaking of the Free Press, headline today, and the Free Press is still with us. One wonders how much longer, but big front page headline, again, Monday, October 10 is when we're taping this. Weed business off to a slow start in Vermont. Start with Nakuma. Good idea to legalize marijuana. Of course, October 1st was the start of, I guess, retail hot shops opening up in some places. Big issue? Are you running across that issue much with your campaign?
No, most people don't seem to care either way, because we've had the medical aspect for a while, which I don't know about here, but in Maine, people were able to kind of get the recreational aspect through medical. And so I don't really think it's that big of an issue. I do like the fact that hopefully we can get some revenue off of it eventually. And I'm glad Vermont is going slow in building I know the city has not voted for it, but the town has, and a few other cities. I do appreciate that they're allowing each municipal to make their own decision, and it's not a statewide thing. So I have not come to a lot of it, but I hope we are able to see the revenue go back into the communities.
Pam, was this a good initiative by Vermont?
I think it was important for Vermont to make this choice, partly because there will be control of quality for people, which has been an issue over time, and that also the opportunity for small business entrepreneurs is really a big one. I'm glad that we've started out slowly. Nakuma and I had the privilege, along with some local House candidates, to speak to someone in Alberg the other day who is beginning their small business. Right. It's a couple that, again, is very excited at the prospect. Alberg is one place that's opted in, as is St. Albans Town in Franklin County. And I think the fact that, we're seeing Rutland and Middlebury and Burlington as the beginning hubs for this, and they are going slowly, we're going to learn about what works well and what doesn't. Where I've been hearing about it is in the high school classes at MVU that I've been invited to visit in the last couple of weeks, where the students are interested in that, and they're saying, well, don't you think we should lower the age? Which I've said, no, I think the 21 is an important break point in terms of people's maturity and their responsibility, especially when you consider brain development.
Running into any students who are not happy about this, perchance?
Well, and again, I think they were saying, well, we can do things anyway that adults aren't going to know about, which, yes, we know that's true. But I think when you are setting up infrastructure and you're talking about legalizing substances like this, you need to have really good guardrails around it. So I do think it was a good move for the state. I do think it could do something for our economy, certainly, and that, as I said before, that this particular substance, there are going to be some quality standards for it that have not been in place previously.
Senator, good move for Vermont to legalize marijuana and now start opening some marijuana retail shops around the state?
Well, at least from the public input, this is something that the public wants.
Yeah, and that was pretty clear to you?
That was pretty clear in the various discussions, and I've been in these discussions in committees for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, however long it's taken for this to come. I do have some concerns. Among the concerns are economic. Many of the discussions painted this tremendous picture of this is the revenue source that's going to end taxation in Vermont for anything else because the huge amounts of money that we're going to get. And I don't believe that's true. And time will tell as we look at it. But what we're seeing is that the costs of regulation, the costs of oversight, the costs of education, and some of the costs associated for dealing with medical issues that result are costs that are real. And we're seeing that in some of the states that have legalized marijuana. I still also remain concerned that the federal government has not matched what the states are doing, and that conflict in law is something that we haven't seen yet. Depending upon what the next administration is in Washington, we may or may not see it, but that too is a concern. But nonetheless, I'm at a point of saying, let's see how this goes, but let's make sure that we follow what's happening, that we keep a close look at what we're spending, what the costs are, what the implications are, so that we understand them. And the fact that we're moving at a relatively deliberate as opposed to breakneck pace makes sense.
I'd certainly be interested in the comments of the former longtime sheriff here. Bob, you got a different view on this, or what do you think?
Well, I certainly have a view on it. After spending decades with this war on drugs, so to speak, as my career, when it first came out with the decriminalization of marijuana, thus leading into the legalization of marijuana, and such as Senator Brock has mentioned, I'm not sure that we got a cash cow sitting here in front of us, and I'm hoping that. As far as my thoughts on it, I'm hoping that because we passed this and legalized this, that we did this not because we were looking for additional income coming into our general fund. That should not be the reason that we do this. But I've come a long ways in this. I haven't been out fighting crime for a number of years, so to speak, and now it's not a crime. But I know a very, very nice couple who resides in Sheldon. They're actively involved in this. Nice folks. We put it on the ballot in Sheldon. It passed. I wish them well. My biggest concern is, first of all, we don't have the data on this. We don't have the statistic on this. We're looking for Colorado all the time, it appears. And some days are better than others when it comes to getting the proper statistics from Colorado. But my only concern is, while we're growing and learning about if this is a good or a bad move, is public safety on our highways. You know, I'm concerned about the testing ability or lack thereof, the testing ability. We have DRBs, not DRBs, DREs on the highways here.
Sounds like that was the governor's big concern about this inability of police to know if someone's just stoned as opposed to drunk. That sounds like that's an ongoing concern, I guess.
Well, it is an ongoing concern because we don't know the answer to it, and we're constantly hearing, well, we have alcohol, and people are still driving on the roads. Well, and that may be, but that doesn't make it right. We don't want to double our public safety efforts on our highways because my family and everyone's family and friends use the public highways. So, I guess the jury's still out on it. I hope it's successful. I hope we have this cash cow that they're looking for here. I don't think we're going to, but I'm going to sit back and just see how it all, sugars off, so to speak.
Speaking of cash cows or the lack thereof, sounds like you folks are the candidates, but it sounds like affordability seems to be the huge issue this campaign. And we're down to just about 17 minutes. Try to be concise with a broad question, but is it realistic? I mean, everybody wants Vermont to become more affordable. Is it realistic with seemingly increasing demands for state services that Vermont could be more affordable? Bob, can you give me a minute or two on that?
Well, I'd love to think that it is realistic. I'm not sure that it is. I think we have a lot of tough work in front of us. I mean, people are talking about the price of everything from gas to groceries. Economy is a big issue here in the state of Vermont. But I think in order to make this work, we have to reach across the aisles, and we have to do this as one, not ours versus D's or vice versa. The bipartisanship has to come forward on this because this is a tough bill. One of the keys, I think, is to address Act 250. And I know there's the environmental concerns by some folks, and I too am concerned about our environment, water quality, so on and so forth. It's a big concern of mine, but in order to bring industry in and commercial in and housing in so that the price of houses aren't double what they are presently is, we need to look at Act 250 and we need to streamline that system. And I've spoke to Senator Brock about this on a couple different occasions, and it's a tough egg to crack. But I'd like to think it's possible, but we got a lot of work to do.
Senator, is it realistic?
There are things that we can do. There are many things we can do, and the issue is doing them. We always talk about where can we get the additional revenue for this program? How can we trim spending to deal with it? That's really the issue. If you want to make things affordable, stop spending. It's pretty simple. But it's pretty hard to do in practice because you always have to weigh what the public wants and what the public needs versus what we can afford. But there are lots of things we can do, and we've begun to make progress in doing them. We made some progress regarding Act 250 in the last session in terms of simplifying, making it more direct, allowing things like priority housing projects to be built, doing things that would lower the cost of housing. And if you look at what are the real pieces of this that are really important that are affecting our economy, our demographic crisis of not having enough people to be able to fill jobs. You can't go anywhere without a help wanted sign. So doing something about that can make things more affordable because A, it puts people to work, it adds more people to our economy that pay taxes and therefore spread out and lower the taxes that everyone else pay. It adds more kids to our schools if we are able to increase that. And that's where things like our remote worker program and our returning worker program, which we funded over the past 2 years, have made progress in doing that. And those are among the few things that actually produce a return on investment. We can actually see dollars coming in as opposed to dollars going out. Doing more things like that are critically important. Clearly, we have to do things about housing. Right now, there are houses that are being built. The cost of the building is less than what a bank would appraise the house for. And so there's a gap right there. And part of the reason, if you look at what's in the cost, well, obviously the supply chain problems we have, the lack of construction workers is driving up costs. But there is also simply the issue of how do we build houses that people can actually afford to make them affordable in the first place, and where do we get the funds for that to in fact happen? We're working on that, and I think we're making pretty good progress on making that happen, but there's a lot more. We have to speed up Act 250. We have to make it simpler and more direct. We have to eliminate the duplication. The duplication, for example, of having a process that goes through a local level and then has to go all the way back to the Act 250 level, and Act 250, the majority of applications are approved relatively quickly, but those that aren't, those are the ones that are killing us because the average appeal takes over a year to deal with. So adding more, another justice or judge to the Superior Court's Environmental Division is one thought that we've had, and I've had a bill to do that, to provide additional clerical resources to do that. Looking at Act 250 shouldn't be a full employment act for engineers and attorneys. We've got to make it simpler, more direct, more understandable, and clearer so that if a person makes an application that meets certain criteria, it should be reasonably certain that the application will be approved. Right now, there's the high degree of uncertainty that may add up to 30% of the cost of the house to administrative costs associated with a process of getting the house built. That's wrong. We can fix those things.
Okay, Pam, again, back to this side.
And to
Anyway, you know the question.
piggyback a little bit on what Randy was saying,
Yeah.
I think, looking at Act 250 and also looking at where we can delegate to the towns that have the infrastructure to, again, predictably and quickly build housing and develop in the zoning laws within towns is going to be really important. If we're not dealing with the housing issue, we can't attract the workforce that we really need right now to come to the state and not only be able to do the filling of the jobs that we need done, but to also be able to increase our tax base so that the services and supports that we need are able to be provided to people and that they're funded at a level where they're effective. I think there's always that issue of if we're funding everything in a marginal way and nothing's functioning well, we're not investing well. So we need to really take a good look at what we are investing in as a state, I think. And I'm kind of reminded of my days as a nonprofit person working with the United Way, where their rule of thumb was we want to be results accountable. So what we always say as our mantra is stop, start, less, more. What do we need to stop doing? What do we need to do more of? What do we need to do less of? And what do we need to start that's meeting emerging needs that's going to make a bigger difference? difference right now. I think it's really critical, again, that we are attracting new people here. We know from the numbers we've seen recently that during the time of COVID, we've brought in at least 5,000 new people. It would be really good to know why they're here and what the impact has been here in the state. I think it's again, looking at how we are investing the resources that we do have, particularly as the federal American Rescue Plan Act money is invested in housing and some other really important projects. How are we going to sustain the momentum that we've begun? How are we investing wisely? And what do we know about how we spent the money so that going forward we're making informed decisions that are also allowing stakeholders to give us feedback, both the people who are doing business and the people who are taxpayers themselves.
Nakuma, again, can possible to make Vermont a more affordable place?
I think there is a possibility to do it. I think bringing in more people, we were at a housing forum recently and we found out that there's a stat saying that we need 3,300 more houses to meet our current need, not including the influx, and we're about to open 2 great businesses in the town, which are going to attract more workers. And to increase our population will increase the burden of taxes through everybody, and also for the children. It'll help bring more funding within schools. The affordability issue, though, is now a nationwide issue, not just a Vermont issue. And so Senator Rock talked about the supply chain issue. And so I think there's so much we can do in-house, but a lot of it has to do with the external factors.
Again, down to just under 10 minutes. Start with Nakuma. Just seems like there's always more, more pressure for more state services. But this issue the homelessness issue has gotten quite a bit of attention. I guess it's a Vermont Emergency Rental Assistance program, and there's been some significant funding. But again, the governor was criticized for these people, they're going to not have a place to live pretty soon. How can you let that happen? So my question, and just try to take about a minute with this, start with Nakuma. Should this be a responsibility of state government? Should state government do what it needs to do to care for the homeless population in the state?
I think it is our duty to help the lessest person we have. We're only as strong as our weakest link. But one thing I've noticed Vermont does very bad is actually it's a crisis every year when winter comes around about supporting these people, and we don't seem to work on supporting them and creating housing for them during the summer. And every time winter comes around, it's like, where's the money to keep them housed? Which is very important through the winter. But if we were able to not see it as an immediate problem, a critical problem, and start working on creating a long-term solution for them, I think that's the issue we need to work on. I think housing them throughout the winter is important, but I think in the spring we need to start working on legislation to not make this a critical issue every fall and every winter for them.
Pam, should, again, give about a minute or so. Should this be something state government should just be totally
State government has a significant responsibility around this, but so do the rest of us as community members. I mean, this is a longstanding issue, and the seasonality of homelessness is not lost on me as somebody that worked in the Agency of Human Services for a long time. I don't think that we have approached this oncoming issue and the cliff that people are about to face with being unhoused yet again in the right way. I think state government had a stronger responsibility, and to just say, oh, well, we didn't know the money was running out and here we are. I think we do need to step up to the plate. I know the governor is committed, at least in spirit and philosophy, to supporting the most vulnerable. And I would contend that if you do not have stable housing, if you are a homeless person or a family, which we're seeing more and more, you are very, very vulnerable. And the investment to have people be housed saves money down the line for healthcare and other kinds of concerns. So yes, I do think that state government has a strong responsibility around this.
Randy, give about a minute. And of course, one of your successors, the current state auditor, Doug Hoffer, kind of got into the issue of money being spent on this issue. But about a minute or so, should state government just take command of this issue?
State government has a role and a distinct role in housing and in housing the homeless, and indeed in housing everybody else and making housing understandable. Yeah. A great first step was the publication of a webpage in the Department of Housing, Children and Families, Department of Children and Families, part of the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, that details all of the various housing programs and all of the various programs and where to call and who to call if you're homeless, if you have a weatherization problem, all those things. And I'm going to put that out on Facebook, on Front Porch Forum this week for everybody to look at. It's a great resource to help not only the homeless, but everybody who has a housing issue to find it in one place and what to do. We've got a tremendous investment in housing. We've made progress on the rental housing program, on expanding housing through accessory developments, and making them particularly available in programs to those who are exiting homelessness. That, again, is an additional incentive. There's more to do, and we're doing a lot.
Bob, should state government do whatever it needs to do so homelessness is not an issue or big issue in Vermont?
Well, I think the state certainly has a responsibility in the homeless population here, but my concern is rather than continually finding housing and food and whatever else, is to getting to the crest of the problem here as to why are they homeless. I'd like to see more money, more work put into why are these people homeless and what can we do to alleviate the homelessness throughout Vermont rather than to continue a program that we just continue to fund down the road for decades here. So let's find out why they're homeless. Let's work toward preventing any more people from becoming homeless and start working on those cures. That's what I'd like to see happen.
Down to under 5 minutes. I think it's time for closing statements here. How about I'll start with you, Bob? How about 1 minute or so? Make your case. Why should voters in the Franklin Senate District send you to the Senate?
Well, I think that my track record has proven that I care about constituents within Franklin County. The record in itself speaks for itself. I enjoy public service. I listen to folks. I return all phone calls. I enjoy the work that I'm doing. I look forward to the opportunity to going back to Montpelier so I can sit beside Senator Brock on his reelection and learn from his expertise and so on and so forth. And at some point in time, quite possibly, I could be the senior senator here in Franklin County. But I ask for your support. I thank you. And I look forward to November 9th.
Senator, again, going for a sixth Senate term, correct? Sixth term?
You know, we spent a lot of time talking about the big issues, and there are lots of big issues. But, you know, one of the roles that I enjoy the most being the Senate are the small issues. And we're confronted with a lot of small issues that are really big for the people who are affected. I don't know how many people that I helped over the past 2 years during COVID deal with problems associated with COVID, dealing with getting unemployment, for example, insurance covered, because when the unemployment system cratered, to be able to intervene and find somebody to call to help people. When East Berkshire had a water problem and their water system collapsed, getting through the maze and getting people's attention in state government to help those people solve that problem and get the state to intervene to help fix the water problem. When the Alberg American Legion was not able to open a couple summers ago because it couldn't get its cooking stuff approved by the state, getting to somebody in state government that can actually get to the person who's supposed to do it to get them moving to actually do it. Those are the kinds of things that make a difference. And my last and favorite one was a guy who was I think he was from Enosburg, and he had just moved here 2 or 3 years ago, had to get his driver's license first time in Vermont. And he couldn't get it done because he had a parking ticket in Boston 21 years ago. And he could never get anyone on the line in Boston because he couldn't pay the ticket without the ticket number. Well, again, helping that guy by contacting somebody at the commissioner's office in the Department of Motor Vehicles who could call a double secret number in Boston to get the ticket number so that guy could get his license. This is one of the things that we do every day, and I enjoy it.
Pam, why are you a good choice for one of the two Franklin County senators?
Well, in a sense, I would echo what Senator Brock has said about being a really good listener and somebody whose role in leadership, from being a home visitor all the way up to leading a statewide organization for families, has been to listen to what people need and to help them navigate what are increasingly complex systems to get their needs met with as little red tape as possible. I feel like my education, I have a master's in educational leadership, being a parent, a grandparent, and as I said, a small business owner and somebody who's run large organizations. I know how to find solutions, and I am somebody that will represent people's voices well. Like others have stated, I'm more interested in being a public servant than being a politician, and I think that I will serve you really well. So I look forward to your vote, hopefully, and also November 9th, when we know what the decisions are and can move forward as individuals and as a community.
Nakuma, I'll give you about a minute to make your case.
Okay. I think I bring in a unique perspective. I actually come from, I say, a divided home. My husband's a Republican, so I understand about crossing the line and like speaking and walking through programs. I don't believe one party or the other is going to actually make a difference. I think working together will make a difference. So it's not about being individuals. It's about being part of the whole and the collective. I am a listener. I am always volunteered and helped. I'm a mother. That's why I decided to run. I want to make sure my children have a good future ahead of them, and I can actually help create a pathway for them and all the other children coming up.
Very good. That's going to do it. Again, we've got all 4 candidates here in the running in the Franklin Senate District, a little changed district from last time around, but now 4 candidates, 2 seats at stake, 1 open seat with Republican Senator Corey Perrin of St. Albans not running for re-election. Many thanks to all the candidates. Nakuma Palczewski, St. Albans Town Democrat, Pam McCarthy, St. Albans Town Democrat, Senator Randy Brock, Swanton Republican, and Rep. Bob Norris, Republican from Sheldon. Thanks for the time. I appreciate that, folks. And good luck again voting from now. Again, we're taping this show on Monday, October 10. Voting now. Folks should have gotten their ballots in the mail a few days ago. Voting now till November 8th. I'm Richard Cowperthwait. Thanks for watching us on Northwest Access TV. Thanks to producer Alan for doing all the hard work around here. See you next time.